Tuesday talk schedule. Join me in welcoming our guest speaker today, Professor Michael Tofias. He's in the Department of Political Science, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and he's a colleague of our very own Professor Jennifer Marola. We're so pleased that he accepted our invitation, and as you can, he doesn't have it up, but he's going to be speaking on Passing the Buck, the Congressional Contribution Network, 1985 to 2006. Please join me in welcoming Professor Tofias.
Hi, and thanks to Jen for having me in. She, of course, didn't tell me that this was going to be videotaped. And she says, oh, you teach a lot of online classes. You should be comfortable with that, all the technology. But what she doesn't know is that my teaching assistant, the very first time I put together a video lecture, told me my face was creepy and I should not put it in the videos. So, and also, this is work with Brendan Nyhan, who's a Robert Wood Johnson Fellow right now at the University of Michigan. And he's much prettier than me. So if this project was going to end up online as a video, we'd be way better off if it was Brendan doing the presentation. But thankfully, this is about social networks, and social networks right now are pretty sexy, so hopefully I'll at least be able to maintain the interest of the audience in the room. So this project got started because we wanted to study social networks since we thought they were so sexy. And we looked at the member-to-member campaign contribution data, and we saw it increasing over time. And we thought, gosh, that would make a really nice network. It's very obvious that it is a social network where one member is making a contribution to another member, creating a tie. And so we launched into this project, and we got some funding from the Dirksen Congressional Research Center. And what we've done is we've combined gifts that candidates make to each other with the gifts that they make to each other through their leadership packs as well. So it's sort of all the relationships between members. So a little step of terminology here. In the social networks literature, the focus starts with nodes or vertices. For us, these are individual members of Congress and their leadership packs. The relationships between two members is a tie, or an edge. In our case, since it's a contribution, it's directed. It's from one member to another. And they're weighted. They come in amounts. $1,000, $2,000, $10,000. We can look at the total amount of contributions, which is something that researchers have been doing for a while. But we can also exploit the social network properties, starting with the dyadic relationships between two members, and then finally the overall pattern of contributions which forms the social network, which is oftentimes called a graph. And each member has a position in the graph. Okay? So there's overall properties to the social network, and then there's the relationship that each member has to the graph as a whole, which is also an individual level measure. So we want to look at parties as networks. We don't see any members giving gifts to the rival party members. The only time you see anything that looks like that is when there's party switching and the FEC data is improperly coded. So there are two questions we want to ask with our party as a network. What kind of coalitions do we see? And who leads the party coalitions? So what we found, and I'm going to show you today, is that each party coalition has become more unified and less factional at the same time that parties have become more polarized as legislative voting coalitions. And secondly, we're going to show that network centrality is key to understanding institutional advancement in Congress. So here's a pretty social network of congressional data. This is James Fowler's co-sponsorship data, where the nodes are members of Congress, and the ties between them are how frequently they've co-sponsored legislation together in the 108th Congress. And we see pictures like this and we launch off into this project because we're, I guess, graph-loving political scientists, as is the style these days, and we wanted to make our own pretty pictures. So here's the problem with our research, is that's our pretty picture. This is just atrocious. It made us want to give up. It's sort of a blob. We call it an ugly network sometimes. So I think maybe we have to work harder to explain what is going on. But I think that it'll all become clear that this is a feature of the network and not a bug, so to speak. So one of the first things that social network analysts usually do when they get a data set is to look at the density of the network. So here's density of the contribution network by party, and what we see, like the overall total of contributions, it's been increasing over time for both parties. So density is simply the percent of ties out of all possible ties that exist in the network. We have a relatively sparse network overall. As you can see, it is only going up to about 6% of all ties. So these are sparse networks that we're looking at. So even though they look like blobs, they have a particular kind of character. Another way we could really get at the shape of these is by simply looking at plots of in degree versus out degree. So in degree is simply the number of contributions each member is getting from their colleagues. And out degree is the number of contributions that each member is making to other colleagues. And you'll notice that this is the Republican network over time. And what you'll notice is it takes on sort of an L pattern. The same shape is found in the Democratic network. So the idea is that there are lots of givers and lots of receivers, but there are not a lot of members of Congress who are both actively givers and receivers in a given Congress. And at some level, this is the root of the sparseness and maybe the ugliness of our network. So we want to think about, theoretically, what our party coalitions look like. Well, we are good Duke students of John Aldrich, like Jen. And so we start by following Key and Aldrich, and we think of parties in three parts. That there are parties in government, that there are parties have a form as an organization, and that parties have a different form in the electorate. In Aldrich formulation, parties are used by teams of office seekers to solve social choice problems, collective action problems, and coordination problems induced by ambition. In our conception, a well-functioning party should be one that's fairly unified in its contribution network and not marked by factions. So, candidates need money to run in tough re-election campaigns. Parties, in some amorphous sense, want the money to go to those who need it, who face those tough re-elections. This creates a collective action problem, since members would prefer to be in the majority party, but they would prefer if their colleagues were doing the fundraising and the contributions to each other. They have a preference even while they are raising money, maybe to hold on to it themselves, to collect a war chest for a potential future campaign that was tough. So, and they might have parochial interests as well. They might want to give money to members in order to buy some sort of personal coalition to advance through the leadership network, as opposed to using the money in sort of the most efficient way. So there are lots of individual interests versus group interests. And then there's coordination. There are potentially coordination problems. You don't want too much money to go to members who don't need the money. And so we want to use the network statistics to analyze the shape of the party coalitions. So this might be an example of a unified coalition where there are strong ties across most of the network. A coalition that's marked by factions might look something more like this, where there